Hello everyone, bringing you a video today talking about these, and these are quite unremarkable black rubber Wellington boots, or gum boots, or whatever terminology you want to use for them. I'm going to be calling them Wellington boots. A little bit confusing because obviously Wellington boots can mean something completely different in the army, but that's the terminology I'm going to use because in the civilian world, that's what they're most recognised as far as I'm aware. These are simply rubber boots, much as you might have for gardening or any other purpose of that nature, and they are army issue, or well, military issue anyway. The reason I want to do a video on these is they're quite a useful item to pick up if you can find them. The particular one I have here is dated 1945, but as we'll see in the video, I have much later dated examples which are, with some detail differences, essentially the same design, visually very, very similar. And they were used in a myriad of different roles. We'll talk a little bit about that before we look at these in detail on the floor. We'll have a look at the two pairs that I have for comparison today. They are used quite extensively by all three services. You certainly see them in photographs of all three services in use. There are various different uses for them. Obviously, the Royal Navy would use them as a form of sea boot. The RAF would use them for ground crew and so forth to a degree, and the Army would use them as well. They were an early part of sort of chemical warfare clothing, so you'd see men wearing denims with these. Royal Navy decontamination parties wearing oilskins with rubber boots, and in early MBC manuals, or at the time it was chemical biological manuals, the Royal Air Force, the Army had transitioned to DMS boots in the 1960s. The Royal Air Force hadn't, and it was specified that the Royal Air Force, when wearing the chemical biological suit, the CB suit, the early progenitor of the MBC suit, they would wear rubber boots with it, because obviously they still actually wore leather soled ankle boots at the time, or shoes, and so wearing boots without an absorbent sole was important, so they would wear these. And as I say, photographs of early chemical warfare, nuclear warfare training in the British Army would show denims being worn with these, and other sort of Cold War institutions like the Civil Defence and so forth would use them as well. Very plain black rubber Wellingtons of this pattern. Speaking of the pattern of them, we'll have a look at these now on the floor in a little bit more detail. We have a 1945 dated pair, this is one of them, and a 1980s dated pair, the date of which I will have to look at when we put them on the floor to have a look at. So we'll get into having a look at them in more detail now. So you have to forgive me, these are a little bit dusty from storage, but these here are a 1945 dated pair of the Wellingtons. We'll have a look at the details of them here. You can see the seam detail and so forth there. We have a textured strip moulded in around the where the sole meets the upper of the boot there. See the tread pattern there. We have the size 13. These are quite a large size. We have the tread pattern, as you can see there. So quite heavily worn. The heel's quite heavily worn down there. Some damage to these, unfortunately. They've split here and at the front, and I think there's also some damage on these as well. They're a little stiff from age. We have an eyelet at the rear here, as you can see on the uppers there. If I bring that up there, you can see. And these are made by Dunlop, as you can see. It's actually marked around the top of the boot there. This strip is separately moulded piece, and that's just coming away slightly there. But as I say, they are otherwise in pretty good condition. You've got the cloth lining there, size printed at the front again, size 13. And if we move these around, you can see the military stamps in here. Now, if I have to turn this round like this, and hopefully I'll be able to show you the detail in here, get enough light in. It might be a little clearer on the other boot. You can see there that the large broad arrow, we've got 1945 there, and we have Dunlop. Well, it's not very clearly stamped there, but that's the Dunlop stamp in there, the manufacturer's stamp. Have a look at the other boot and see if it's a little clearer in there. Let's have a look here. That's a little bit clearer in there, yes. So Dunlop Rubber Company, you can see there. In fact, that's a lot clearer. 1945. And again, you can see the War Department stamp here. We've got plenty of broad arrows. I think we don't have the soldiers, so we don't have two facing broad arrows. And again, the size in the front there, size 13. So these are quite a large size. And as I say, in terms of design, they are just a plain black rubber Wellington. Bit of a toe cap to them there, bit thicker piece there for reinforcement. You see the seams running up around the front here. Just giving you a look around to show you all the details of these, show you obviously how they're manufactured, where all the mould lines are and everything. We'll leave this one in frame. I'll take this one out. And by way of comparison, this is a 1983 dated example, very, very similar, as you can see. There are some minor differences. The tread pattern is slightly different. If we compare them side by side, the tread pattern is slightly different. As you can see, they are in fact a different manufacturer, but the position of the seams and everything is very, very similar. We do have an extra mould piece in the moulding here, or thicker area of the moulding here. Piece of reinforcement, I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't seem to have any purpose. It may do in a civilian item these are based on, perhaps. And again, you can see all the seams, the mould lines here. The rear seam here is slightly different shape, but they are very similar, and certainly I've worn these in place of wartime. I don't know if it's a manufacturing difference, as opposed to Wood Dunlop wellies in 1983 have had exactly the same seam lines and everything on them as here. I'm not entirely sure on that, but these certainly serve the purpose, and they are military issue. I'll turn them around now. You can have a look at this side as well. Again, just showing you all the seam lines and everything there. We do have the moulded in toe cap, as you can see there. Don't have the textured strip round the bottom here this time, but that is a 1983 dated example. We'll take the 1945 example out of the way, bring in the other 1983 dated example, and these are made by BTR, I think, if I remember correctly. We'll have a look at that now. Again, we have the strip round the top, as you can see here, with the name moulded in. And we have made in England by BTR, as you can see there. And inside we have, these are a lot more supple, so it's easier to show you this. We have the NATO stock code, and then we have 1983, the date underneath there. An interesting detail to note here is that we have a 22D prefix to the stores code, which shows these are RAF issue. I believe 22D being the code for shoes and boots, quite appropriately. And these are a size 11, I think, if I remember correctly, and these fit me rather nicely, much better than the size 13s. Again, you can see the stamping in there, it's a little clearer. So yeah, they're a useful item to have. There's the size up in the front there again, as 13 was on the other pair. So as I say, a useful thing to have, and obviously a very long-lived design. I mean, it's hard to go wrong with rubber Wellingtons, really, rubber boots. So it's not surprising they didn't change very much. But it shows you again the time period these were a useful item to have for, right the way through from the Second World War. And of course they were used previously to that, though I'm not design change. I'm not entirely sure on the manufacturing and so forth, if the manufacturing would have been the same or as close as it is between the 1945 and 1983 dated examples, whether the earlier examples would have been manufactured slightly differently. Of course, gun boots have been issued since the First World War and probably previous to that, as well as the longer trench waders that were issued as well. So they're a very long-lived item of uniform, but as I say, certainly having 1945 dated examples and 1983 to compare, I'm happy using these more modern ones, these 1983 dated ones, as a stand-in for earlier periods. And I'm hoping at some point in the future to do a video showing early chemical warfare kit, well, early nuclear warfare kit, in fact, with denims, these, and a radiac meter. That's a plan for the future, to do a little video on that, so keep an eye out for that going forward. You'll have seen a detailed look at these, which I'll probably link through from that video. But that's the details I wanted to have a look at on the two pairs of Wellingtons here. So there we are, slightly unusual topic for a video, maybe not a typical piece of militaria, perhaps, but these are a useful thing to find, a useful thing to have if you can find them. And as I say, of the proper military pattern, there are plenty of black rubber Wellingtons around, but you really want them sort of in this pattern, because this is the moulds that we use to produce them. And they're plain black, obviously no trade name or anything on them other than on the rim, but that's just moulded into black rubber. It's not a coloured badge of any description. So if you can find them, pick up a pair. I picked up the 80s dated pair at an event for wearing purposes. Obviously these 1940s dated ones are a little damaged, and besides which I want to preserve them. I don't really want to be wearing them, and they're also a little big for me. They're in a very large size, especially for the time period. But as I say, a useful item to get hold of if you happen to spot them at an event or for sale elsewhere. Highly recommend picking them up, because they're a useful bit of kit to have. But that's, I think, everything I wanted to cover here. So I'll do my usual little spiel. Just to say, if you haven't already subscribed, I'd greatly appreciate if you would. Obviously, if you want to see more of my uploads, make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button, which will notify you of future videos if you think you'd like to see more of this sort of content. There's also the Facebook and the Instagram page, and now a Twitter account as well. All three of those are linked down below if you want to keep up with the channel on social media. If you really like my uploads and you'd like to support the channel, you can do. There's the Patreon and PayPal links down below. Very big thank you to everyone on there who've supported me through either of those methods. It's very, very much appreciated. And as I say, thank you very much to all of you. There's also an email address down below should you wish to get in contact with me, share photographs, ask questions, that sort of thing, and you don't have the social media options. That's a good place to get in touch with me. And also sending larger images and things as well is best through email if possible. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So until next time, bye for now.